Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, what time of day it is. Thanks for joining us here on the ADL 320 channel. Just thought I'd put together a quick video to talk a little bit about using ForeFlight in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, ForeFlight itself is not unique to being used in Flight Simulator. You can certainly use it on any of the platforms, but I have found that it works really well with MSFS, much like it has in my other platforms, and thought I'd share a couple of the tips and tricks along with how it's utilized in the sim. You should be seeing us sitting on the ground at an airport now. We're actually sitting out at Deer Valley Airport at the time this video is being recorded, and we've got ourselves fired up with the aircraft in Flight Simulator, and having a look at ForeFlight Mobile in the background, or in the foreground rather, giving us a nice overview of a picture of things here. And one of the things you might consider with ForeFlight, obviously it's not inexpensive. It's a tool definitely used by pilots. That's obviously the primary application for it is our pilots that are actually flying actual aircraft out there. As you guys may know, I'm a private pilot myself, fly Cessna 172 G1000s primarily, although I've flown others in the past, based here in Arizona as well. And I do use ForeFlight, but because I'm not always in the real airplane, I have found application for using the application in the simulator. So although it does cost me, roughly $200 a year or $150 a year, whatever the heck the price is, I found it invaluable to be able to keep my skills up and be able to use this in the simming environment as well. It really makes a nice complete picture for your work when you're actually in the actual airplane too. So right now, just kind of give you a quick overview of it. I'm doing a view right now that allows you to see sort of an overview of the environment from a map perspective. A lot of symbology being shown on the map on the ForeFlight display at the moment. As you can see, there are some boxes being shown where you've got some shaded colors, you've got some reds, you've got some yellows. You can see some weather up off of the airport property in the northwest that's kind of coming in this direction, which is kind of cool, because in the sim, people have asked how realistic is the weather. You can see, if I turn off ForeFlight for a moment, you can actually see that we indeed have a cell sitting out there pretty much where it's being depicted on ForeFlight. So it's downloading the real world weather information. It's providing that information to me in the sim, which is great. I can also see other things, such as this yellow shaded area, which if I click on it will give me some detailed information, which lets me know that there is a convective SIGMET that is valid at this point in time, and it'll give you the information on that convective SIGMET, and that's obviously for developing storms if you're not familiar with sort of the weather forecast information that's provided and the actual conditions that you might see here. We also have the ability to see other things going on, such as this red area here, which many of you probably figured out is restricted. If you just tap on the screen, you can see some details, and it shows that there's a TFR in effect. Now, I know for a fact that TFR is valid for firefighting activities, but if you click on the little drop down, it'll tell you exactly what it's for, to provide a safe environment for firefighting aviation ops. That's exactly what that TFR is for. But you get all the details about whether it's active, whether it's not active, the bounds of that, and which is great is when you're flying with ForeFlight in the simulator, it will caution you to basically when you approach a TFR or any other type of issue, airspace, if there's a TFR over a stadium, when you're kind of arriving at an airport, when you're on final, it'll give you some announcements on those types of things. So it's really cool to give you a full picture of the immersion in the environment. And you can see our little blue blurb that's flashing for us here is showing us on the ground here outside of Qatar Aviation at Deer Valley Airport. So it is definitely georeferenced along with where you are in the sim. That's great, because when you do bring up things like plates, approach plates, it will actually georeference itself with your aircraft against those approach plates. So it is really cool to get that detail. a single click on the screen itself will give you information about the area that you've clicked on, and you can see things like, okay, where I clicked in the Phoenix class Delta airspace. Also over top of that is Phoenix class Bravo airspace, which begins at 6,000 feet. So you can get a nice picture of things of where you are. Also for the location, which is cool, where I just happen to randomly click. And ForeFlight, these are some of the newer features they've added. It'll give you weather forecast information, so you can actually get full forecasted weather information shown right on ForeFlight itself, which is kind of cool to see. Just looking at the overview of the screen of what you're going to get on the upper left-hand side, you get the arrow and lighting, which is a drop-down, and that allows you to basically check what you want to have displayed as an overlay. So right now I'm showing aeronautical information, which when we zoom in on the map, that's what gives us this like taxi diagram, for instance, the aeronauticals. If we took that away, you'd see it would just be basic information from the map itself. But the aeronautical information adds in details of the airport, the street map, obviously. We could also change that to an aerial view. So if we wanted to just view, an aerial view, especially if you're unfamiliar with an area, you want to kind of see the landscape out and see that visually here, you can do that and play that along with while you're flying in the aircraft. The other thing is the overlays for the sectionals. So if I pull on the sectional for the U.S. sectionals, that's just an entire view of the entire country and area that I have here with sectional maps. So to be able to fly along and again have georeference information and be able to see exactly what you would normally see on a paper sectional is pretty phenomenal. You've got the same thing with IFR. You can do IFR low and high, so flights below 18,000, flights above 18,000. You've got your IFR planning charts that you can use for a little bit longer range over the ocean. Helicopter routes are in here. So these are cool overlays. The other thing you can do with overlays is go back to the sectional here, is you can get into information such as like I was showing radar. So, we pointed out some of those storms earlier, and now you can see this particular storm out to the west. It's currently about that one 75 miles out from us. But it now has a red box around it, which now is going to indicate active convective information. Before, the yellow, and I may have missed that, is an outlook. So that's just giving you an idea that says that the area is ripe for convective activity through 8:55 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. But now that we have this red box, that is showing active convective information, and it's indicating surface up to flight level 450. Just looking at the depiction here, when you zoom in on an area and you look at the storm that's being depicted over Flagstaff right now, you see the little dots indicating the direction that the storm is moving away from Flagstaff, and or towards it rather, and you see that the tops are 426, so the tops are 42,600 feet. So lots of information on this overview that you can get in here, but part of the fun of what people want to do this for is using it for creating routes and flying along with a route. So easy way to do that in ForeFlight, click on flight plan, you tap here your airport pair. So we would say, let's say we're going to do Deer Valley to, I don't know, Grand Canyon, popular tourist spot for folks flying around here. It'll come up automatically with that route, which if I close the box, you can see that it's done just a direct to line, the old direct to magenta line. But it also comes up with some suggested routes that you could choose. So if you wanted to think about doing this for a commercial flight, it will actually come up with suggested routes based on what folks on IFR flight plans are actually filing. So you'll see that in here. You can see where it says ATC cleared. So these are all routes that the ATC folks have cleared flights on. You can see the overview of them above. So as I click on them, it will then lay out that route, that right route of flight, and allow you to kind of suggest, whether you want to take that. Now, you can see it at the time frame that it's done that. So it says cleared last Thursday 139 times. For this route, it was cleared a week ago, and it was done 3 times. And you can see that the type of aircraft that filed were basically turboprops and jets. This one's a pretty popular training route, right? And one that the flight school there flies a lot. So that's why you have so many of them. And the altitudes from 1,000 to 14,000, which is what shows. I don't know who was doing 1,000 feet. That's not really possible, but you get kind of the gist of what's going on. The other thing that you get when you have this information is for the routes, is you can see on the right-hand side, it shows you 1 hour and 53 minutes, and that's based on the projected wind at the altitude that you've selected or the altitude you would fly, and the amount of fuel you'll burn, 20.2 gallons IFR. Now, how does it know that? Well, stepping back a bit, that's because we have the ability in ForeFlight to put in our aircraft. And I have my flight sim aircraft, as you can see here, is 320 Alpha Lima. As you can see here, sitting on the ramp. 320 Alpha Lima has been placed in here in a ForeFlight, and that has all the information for it. So if I were to edit that, you can see that I can put in the type aircraft it is, the category, the color, where it's based, airspeeds. We'll build performance profiles. That's just an easy way of copying and pasting performance profiles for a category of planes. So I might have multiple 172s in here. In fact, I do, because I have my flight sim. I have the planes that I would rent when I fly out of Deer Valley, for instance. They're all set up in here. And so I can use the specific performance profile for that aircraft. Glide speeds ratios, the altitudes, fuel type, what you burn for fuel, all that good stuff can be set up in here, and including weight and balance, which is another thing that you can get into in ForeFlight, is the ability to use a tool for weight and balance. Now, again, for flight simming purposes, might not get into that much, but it's good to know you have. But what is cool to do is build out an aircraft profile, because then you can set your altitudes, and it'll give you information such as estimated wind burn, fuel burn, the wind at altitude, that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we use for this. Just to make it easy, now you can select a route that way, but you might also say, well, what if I don't want to select a route and I just want to kind of snap my own route together? You can do that too, and it's easy to do it visually on the screen. If I want to take a popular vantage point out of Deer Valley and say I want to hit the shooting range on the way out, so if I click over there, what's nearby is VP DSR, which happens to be the shooting range over there. So if I pick that, it'll put that on my route, snap it right on there for you, and it calculates all the distances. Now, I'm going to come into a problem if I do that, because what's going to happen here, as you can see, I'm going to hit that restricted airspace because of what we have going on for the firefighting. So what I might do is say, well, let's not do that then. Maybe we can go another way, and we'll maybe trunk up this way towards Cave Creek. I can either pick an intersection, or if I just pop it here, it'll suggest things of where I might want to have it line up to. And we'll do Victor Papa 512. That's another visual waypoint, which is Sky Free Ranch Carefree. That's cool. That takes us right on out in between these two restricted areas here. And again, you can just kind of do this all the way up if you wanted to work your way up north, and find another a spot that you might want to put in. Maybe you want to even use this Cottonwood Airport as a visual point. You can certainly do that, but you get the gist of it. You can kind of build your route as you go, and it'll put in all the information that you need on the way up. If you wanted to then go direct to Grand Canyon, you certainly could do that. You might want to put another VOR or something else in there, but it gives you the idea. If I wanted to avoid the storms here, for instance, maybe I would come on away over here to Prescott, or instead of Prescott, I might pick the VOR. So there's a Drake VOR that's up here, and I'm showing all, but it didn't quite pick that up. But if I just kind of pick up and move a little bit my route and drop it over here by Drake, there it is, the Drake VOR, and I can add that guy to my route. And there we are. Just make sure I'm not. But see, again, what happens is we're encroaching on that space. So we'll go back to the way we were, but you get kind of the picture. It's really quick and easy to be able to put a route together, and fashion that up pretty quickly for you. When I go and look at the flight plan, it's already built it in for me. Some other tools that you have while you're in here, which is kind of nice, is you can look at your basic traditional nav log that we all used to use going through flight training. Also, the profile is cool. Now, if I wanted to fly at an even 6,000 feet, what you can already see looking at that route that you've put together, where your challenge is going to be. And as you can see, 6,000 feet isn't going to cut it, because I'm going to hit terrain. And it actually tells me that the highest point on that route is 7477 MSL, and I would hit terrain in 82 nautical miles. So I can then say, okay, well, what do I need to do to clear that? Let's just pull that on up. And you might say, okay, let's do 8,500 feet and see how that does for us. 8,500 feet keeps us clear of all the terrain. And we have a clearance of 1,023 feet over the highest point on that route. So these are all really cool ways that you can keep track of things. You can also see airspace being depicted in there as well. So again, getting a big picture of what your route of flight is going to look like. This is another handy tool to use within ForeFlight. to really get a feel for what's going on with your route. If you have a way, if you are a pilot, and you don't use the tool, you can sort of fake a briefing, which is cool to do here. If you want to you really want to get immersed in this and feel what it's like. If I save this to flights, and now what it does is it pulls up this with an ability to get a briefing for this flight. Now, I'm not actually going to get a real file. I'm not going to file a flight plan, but I can adjust the information, put in my estimated time of departure, all that good stuff here for the route. Here's the overlay of the route itself. And if I went and hit briefing, it'll actually go ahead and create a flight briefing for me. And just as if I were taking this flight, real world, I'd get the same information, no different than what I would just because I'm in the sim. I still have the advantage to be able to pull all this cool data up. And then it'll go through all the features that you would do, adverse conditions, temp TFRs, convective SIGMETs, the synopsis for weather, the current weather forecast, NOTAMs. You can just click through all of these and it'll give you all this really, really handy, cool information that you can use to plan your simulated flight, just as you would in the real world. Taking a look at forecasts, a cloud cover, just all the wealth of information that you would use in the actual aircraft you can do here, which is really, really cool. You go back to maps, you get your overview, you can close on the net. Another thing you can do is while you're flying, there is a way to kind of mimic the synthetic vision type of thing that you have in the airplane now in ForeFlight. This was a feature added a while ago, but this is pretty super cool too, because as you're flying, you get your visual cues here to see towers. You can see it on the display here. I'm actually showing hazardous terrain information. So the green, you've got the yellows, and you've got the reds for terrain. And based on where my airplane is hit facing right now, you can see where that terrain, if I turn off the overlay, you would see where that terrain would be in the distance there. You see the towers would be depicted here, even though we don't have in flight sim. Obviously, it knows about them in the real world, so you're still going to get that information also, which is cool. All of your leg information, your speed, you get your ground speed, your GPS altitude, the distance to your next leg. So this is kind of cool to be able to see ahead. Even when you're in the airport environment, if you're facing the airport, you're facing a runway, you will see that runway environment, as you can probably start to see a little bit of the airport symbologies popping up on this display as well. So this is kind of neat to be able to do this and have that shown riding along shotgun with you as you're flying in the airplane. So just another one of the cool features that you can get into within ForeFlight. You've got the other option of doing things like bringing up plates. I mentioned the ability to bring up airport information. So if I wanted to go back to the map, for instance, and I got a couple of ways you can do things. Lots of little shortcuts in ForeFlight. One of the easiest things to do when you're in the map view, you want to take a look at airport information. Just click the airport, and it'll pull up a little pop-up that'll show you information about Deer Valley. The little star in the upper right is I saved as a favorite. Then you can get all kinds of information. By default, for the way I've set it up, is it pulls up the basic airport elevation information, and I'm on the weather tab. So right away, by default, I want to know when I click on an airport, what's the weather like? Well, I can see the current ATIS for the airport right there. 23085, well, not the ATIS, but the weather information. 23085, visibility is 10, clear, temperature 38, all the dew point. And it spells it out for me. If I'm not very good yet at figuring out how to decode METARs, which a lot of new pilots and people new to aviation that aren't used to METARs, well, there's your translation in plain English. You'll get your weather for the nearby airports, which shows up. Really, really cool to get that, right? But then I can also see, I can get other details, the TAF, the terminal forecast, aviation forecast, and show what the weather's going to be coming up. It also has the new MOS forecast information here, where you can get a little bit more accurate and a little bit more timely. But the same details. You can look by time. If you know you're going to arrive at a place, let's say at 10 p.m., what's the weather going to be like if I'm coming back Deer Valley at 10 p.m. tonight? Give you kind of an idea on that. Then you get that daily forecast that I showed you earlier. This is more like your local forecast, if you will. And then the wind information that you can see. This is very helpful because now you're getting it by altitude. So above 3,000 feet, you can see rapid temperature drop, possible unstable air. That will probably translate later on into a SIGMET for turbulence, which will also show up on here. And, you can also get into runway. So it'll show you the runways that are active at Deer Valley and tell you which one right away. What's the best wind? to pick for the current conditions, all the procedures that are available. Now, part of the activity when you get ForeFlight, you got to download the stuff you want to show. So you can't, you could, if you got all the space on your iPad, you can download everything you want. But main thing is to focus on the areas you're going to be flying in. But once you do that, you can start to get cool stuff like the airport diagram. And again, as I mentioned, georeference. So there's my plane sitting there on the ramp. As you're getting your ATIS, and maybe they come up to you and they say, "Hey, we've got some issues with a taxiway being closed, or something's not operational." Well, you can come here and on the map, and you can actually annotate. Let's say taxiway Charlie 12 was closed, and I want to just indicate that here. I can draw right on the screen and put notes or type whatever I wanted on here, and reset all of that, clear it all if I want to clear everything. Getting into typing down ATISs, you can use your scratch pad. And the scratch pad, if I clear that out, you listen to your ATIS, you can start typing down your information, right? This is for DVT, information kilo, time, blah, 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 wind 170. You get the idea. Really handy to have this as a tool in the aircraft to be able to quickly recall information and details right on the fly and on the go, and have that at your fingertips. You can do the same thing for your departure airport. You can also look in this here. So for, let's say there was an arrival that you wanted to take on, or a GPS approach in the Grand Canyon, I can do the same thing. I can click on this here and I can show all kinds of information about. So I think about it as in a computer world, it's like context sensitive. You click on something, you'll get some information based on that. If I wanted to just look at procedures, I can take a look at departures out of Deer Valley. And I know that if I'm on an IFR plan, look what it does for us. This is pretty cool, right? You get a nice overview of all of the IFR standard instrument departures out of Deer Valley. The Deer Valley one is one of the primary ones that you'll use out of here. I can do the same thing for the arrival if there was one, but there aren't arrivals into Deer Valley, into Grand Canyon, but there are approaches available. And so here I can look at the ILS approaches. Let's say I'm going to do the ILS into runway 3. So I can select that. I can pick whatever is going to be my initial approach fix. Maybe it's Amiri, not sure, but we're just going to pick something for yucks here, and add to route. Now it's already added and sequenced in that approach, and it's brought up the approach plate for me on the map view. So the plan view, I've got the approach plate. So as I approach the airport, think about the situational awareness that you're going to have when you're flying into the airport and you've got this. Now, you guys all have this kind of stuff. I'm sure it's available on tools like Navigraph, and I use that a lot as well in conjunction with this. I have the Navigraph app as well that I use along with this. But this one, it gives me a little bit more depth than what I might get even on Navigraph, to the ability of some of the things I can do, because this is, again, it's meant as a tool to be used in an actual airplane and a live environment. But just because you're simulating doesn't mean that you can't still use it for for your simulated flights, which is pretty cool. The other thing that you may have noticed that kind of went away, but is that depending on where you are, if there are other aircraft that are flying around, it'll feed in live aircraft. Now, I don't think at this point in time the flight simulator airplanes are showing in here, but it does pull in actual aircraft that are ADS-B flying in the area. So for whatever reason, I either have that shut off, or some reason it's just not showing right now. But typically I would see those little triangles of other aircraft showing in here. And again, you can see all the other information you can superimpose on here as well. But for right now, just wanted to kind of give you all a heads up and an overview of it. If you think this is cool and you like what's here, maybe you want me to show you something a little bit more detailed, or maybe take it along on a flight, and plan something out using the tool and show you how I use it, I'm happy to do that on another flight at another point in time. But until then, just wanted to give you all an overview of using ForeFlight in Flight Sim. And if it's interesting, go ahead and subscribe. Please hit the like button, and I'll be sure to come back to you at a future point, and hopefully we can do some more of these types of videos. Until then,